Here in Matthew chapter 13, verse 54, when he was coming to his own country, he taught them in their synagogue, insomuch that they were astonished and said, whence hath this man this wisdom and these mighty works? Now notice they're talking about mighty works that they hadn't seen there, but they're hearing stories of his mighty works. But they've heard him preach, and they said the wisdom he's got. Then in verse 55, they say, where did this guy get this? Verse 55 says, is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brethren, which actually James, is not James in the Greek, it's actually Jacob. It's James in the New Testament, in the English New Testament, only because 1611 King James wanted his name in the book. So, sorry to burst your theological bubble. Well, no, I'm not really. I kind of enjoy it most of the time. But anyway, he says here, is not his and his brethren, James, Jacob, Joshua, and Joseph, and Simon, and Judas, and his sisters. So now notice, he's named 4 brothers, and then sisters, plural. Okay? Are they not all with us? Whence then hath this man all these things? And they were offended in him. But Jesus said unto them, a prophet is not without honor, except or save in his own country and his own house. And he did not many mighty works there because of their unbelief. Now notice, many times people, and here's where it comes from. When we teach on healing, people say, well, you're saying we ought to be able to get everybody healed. Yeah. But even Jesus couldn't get everybody healed. And I say, well, where does it say that? And they say right there in Matthew. Well, half the time they don't even know where it is, what they're trying to quote, but they'd heard it. And so you actually go and read what he said. Now, this is one of those sacred cows, so because it limits God. And it says, watch, and he did not many mighty works there because of their unbelief. So it doesn't say, there's a big difference between any and many. He did some mighty works. Can we agree with that? Because he said he did not many. Is that right? So he did not many mighty works, but he did some mighty works. Now get this. Here's how people read it. And he tried to heal many, but could not. That's the way they read it. And that's not in there at all. As a matter of fact, it says, and he did not many mighty works there because of their unbelief. So he did some. Now, why did he try to heal people that had unbelief and yet couldn't get them healed? That's not what it says. It says he didn't get many, or did not many mighty works there because of their unbelief. Now, when somebody is offended at you, they generally don't come to your meetings. If they don't get in your healing line, why? Because they're mad. Now, they'll stand back over there and talk. But they don't come into your healing line and they don't get there. Why? They're offended. And so they'll stay away and talk about you, but never come to the meeting. Well, guess what? If they stayed away because they were offended, you can't blame him for them not getting healed. Is that right? So now watch, because then people say, well, yeah, but there's another place where it said he did no mighty works. Okay, well, let's read that one. That's over in Mark chapter 6 and verse 1. And it says there in verse 1, and now you'll see this is the exact same story told by Mark as opposed to being told by Matthew. Mark chapter 6, verse 1. And he went out from thence and came into his own country, and his disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath day was come, he began to teach in the synagogue. And many, hearing him, were astonished, saying, from whence hath this man these things? And what wisdom is this which is given unto him, that even such mighty works are wrought by his hands? Is not this the same story? It's the same story. Because he even says here in verse 3, is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and Judah and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? And they were offended at him. See, it's the exact same story. Now watch this. But Jesus said unto them, a prophet is not without honor, but in his own country and among his own kin and in his own house. And he could, and read carefully here. And he could there do no mighty work except. So he did a mighty work. It doesn't say he did no mighty work. He said he did no mighty work except he laid, and watch this, that he did no mighty work except that he laid his hands upon a few sick folk and healed them. So now we know, why did they not come to him? Well, they were offended, is that right? And it was because of their unbelief. Well, now notice, here is unbelief, but now it says he could not do any mighty work there. He did no mighty work except. That means he did mighty works. Is that right? Yeah. And strangely enough, this always comes up when it's talking about healing. And here he says that's the one thing he actually did. And people say, oh, see, unbelief. If there's unbelief, you can't get people healed. No, no, no. It says right there that he got them healed. And now watch what it says. He laid his hands upon a few sick folk and healed them. Them who? The few sick folk. Now, it doesn't say he laid his hand. Here's how people read it. He laid his hands on some sick folk and a few of them got healed. Now, I don't know who does that, but they're obviously dyslexic because they're rearranging words, right? But now notice what it actually said. He did no mighty work there except, save, that he laid his hands on a few sick folk and healed them. That means that every person that he laid hands on got healed. Now think about that. Now you say, well, yeah, it was just a few of them. Well, it doesn't matter. If there's 3 out of 3 that come forward and 3 get healed, that's 100%. Now, if you have 3,000 that come forward and 3,000 get healed, that's 100%. Isn't that right? So there it said he healed the ones he laid his hands on. So it doesn't show any failure whatsoever. But this is the way people say, well, see, even Jesus couldn't get everybody healed. And the amazing thing is, it says that they were offended at him. And it's funny because that means they didn't come to him. And I've even heard some preachers say it this way. And he laid his hands upon a few sick folk, and then they always add in their own statement. A few sickly folk that had minor ailments. Okay? That is not in the Greek. It's not there. And so I don't know why they tried to demean it. But the truth is, he laid his hands on a few sick folk. And the sick folk there, even the word for sick there, is a word that can go from anything from a headache to a terminal disease. So we don't know what they had, but we do know this. Every one of them got healed. And every other time it ever mentions, any time it mentions how many were healed, it never gives a number, but it says all. And he healed them all. So he had no failures. So see, this tradition of men, and now it stops people from believing for healing. Because this goes two ways. Number one, people try to say, well, now see, we believe in healing, but we can't get everybody healed because they have unbelief. Now, you have to realize, if your unbelief, okay, unbelief is not stronger than God's power. Unbelief is not stronger than faith. So, but you have to realize, if I'm using my faith, now if I'm trying to use your faith and you have unbelief, then yeah, it won't work for you. But if I'm using my faith will work for me. Your faith will work for you. And my faith doesn't work sometimes. I heard one minister actually say, well, my faith will work for me all the time, and if I try to apply my faith for you, it works some of the time. Okay, that makes actually no sense. Because if I'm trying to apply my faith to you and it fails, then it didn't work for me. Does that make sense? See, here's a problem I've learned. Christians have this thing against knowledge. They read one verse out of Corinthians, knowledge puffeth up, but love edifies. And they'll say that. And ever since that they discovered that verse, especially Pentecostals have had a thing against knowledge. And yet the Bible over and over again tells us that through grace and knowledge, things are added to us. Through the knowledge of God. And he tells us the knowledge of God will cover the earth. So God's not against knowledge. He wants you to have knowledge. Even Paul said, my own countrymen, he said they have a zeal, but without knowledge. So we have to realize God's not against knowledge. He's just against the wrong kind of knowledge, right? And the wrong kind of knowledge is carnal knowledge, which says you got to see it, feel it, taste it, smell it, whatever, before it's true. That's the wrong kind of knowledge. The right kind of knowledge is what this word says is. Simple as that. Amen? So now you should be able to say, and whenever anybody says, well, even Jesus couldn't get everybody healed on his own, he says, whoops, excuse me, that's not correct. You ought to see how simple that is? We just killed that sacred cow. Amen? And not just you, but everybody that's watching, all over Africa, north end of the UK, all across Asia, everywhere we're being watched, which is all over the world, that thing should never be said again. It will be, but it shouldn't be. Amen? So your faith, and get this, when you eliminate either wrong thinking, wrong information, or not knowing or an ignorance of it, when you remove that, then your knowledge grows, and your knowledge of God, Dr. Summerall used to tell us all the time, your faith in God will never go beyond your knowledge of him. You can only have faith in God to the degree that you know his will, and to know his will, you really got to know him. And so we ought to be able to stop that. Now,